Hi guys, so in this video I'm going to take you through a little bit of a paint session that myself and the new lad that we've got at the shop did a little bit earlier in the week. We're finishing off some of these MR2 panels. So the new lad that we've got in, he can already paint, but he's not as confident as what he wants to be in his painting. So we spent sort of the afternoon, sort of I'll say 3/4 of the day, going through some painting bits and some clear coat bits most of all, which is kind of the bit that he wants to get more consistent. Now this is not to say in any way that he is a bad painter. The jobs that he's done so far have been really nice. He did one the other day, start to finish, the repair and the paint, and it was absolutely spot on. But this was basically like kind of my own in-house training day for him, so I thought I'd bring you guys along on this day. So what I'm explaining here is the setup that we're using is the WS400. We're running this at 2 bar, 2.5 turns out, 1 3/4 turns out on the fan only, and we're going for a nice 50% overlap for this first coat. Now this 50% overlap will give us a nice sealed, fully closed coat on this clear coat, but it won't lay it up too heavy. Now we've got two sets of panels in here, so we've got the MR2 panels which are going to get mirror finished, so we're going to really wet these up on the second coat, and we've also got one of the test panel wings in as well, and we're going to do all of them in a different way. So the MR2 panels, the first coat, we're going through this at a 50% overlap to get that nice closed coat. Now what I'm demonstrating to the lad here is that basically we keep the gun perfectly straight onto the panel at all times, and in tight areas like this, I think on a previous job he may have been trying to full trigger in here where it got a little bit wet and we'd had a few little sags. Not an issue because runs or sags in clear can be fixed, but these are little areas that he wants to improve and wanted some sort of tuition on and some time in the booth with me, so I thought I'd bring you guys along. So what I'm explaining here is it's better to slow things down a lot, don't try and rush it, and just feather your trigger around these tight areas and just gently sort of blow these areas in. Take your time, don't rush things, and try and relax as much as you can. The stiffer that you are, the harder it is. Now on again an area like this, I can in some places full trigger up there and down this face, but if I'm not careful I'm going to miss some of these inner areas, which is what I'm just pointing out here. So some of these tighter inner areas you might miss these, so just carefully come back again, just gently feather those in so you're not going too wet on any edges that you don't want to, so you end up with a nice clean finish. You're not overloading in any areas, and just take your time. Now as always, I always hit the edges of the panel first, and then I fill in the main face. Now some people I know don't like to do that, they prefer to do the panel and then do the edges because then they don't get overspray on the panel. Now for the bonnet, I had that around about, I think, 3 turns out for the bonnet because it's a nice flat horizontal panel, whereas these vertical panels we're going to knock it down to 2.5 so we don't overload it on that first coat. Obviously on the bonnet being laid horizontally, the only way the paint can really flow is to flatten out, whereas on a panel like this there is a lot of places obviously this could run or build up on any of these swage lines, so we're taking it nice and easy. Now the one thing, if you notice here, is my gun is always pointed perfectly straight at the panel. Now this is one of the issues that I noticed that he had, that because of his body position on the panel, so I'm stood quite towards the left of this panel, and he was sort of standing more towards the middle of the panel. Now that made it difficult as he came over to the left side of the panel, that as he tried to reach he was kind of turning his wrist out. By turning his wrist out it was increasing the distance, which was making that end drier, and then when he saw that end of a panel was getting drier he was increasing the fluid to try and combat that. But in doing so, on the areas that he did have the panel straight, that then, or the gun straight to the panel, that then meant that some of those areas were getting a bit too wet. So it was more focusing on some sort of strict gun control and technique, which is, as I say, he's a good painter anyway, but some small tips and small tuition will make him into an absolutely outstanding painter. And on this day, you know, we spent a bit of time. I'd say we spent a good couple of hours having a play around in the booth, all the way from the wet on wet stage, all the way through base and clear, and at every step trying to drill these little things in to sort of get rid of any sort of bad habits that he's learned, because he's not had much time to get some hands-on sort of tuition, if you will. And he's a young lad, he's 25, he's extremely keen. A little bit of time for us helping him progress his skills obviously will give us a better staff member, or a team member as we would prefer to call people, because we all work as a team. It's not a case of I am a boss and you are an employee and you do what I say. We all work together as part of a team in our shop. You know, we all carry the load, we all do the work, we all pitch in on the good jobs and the crap jobs. You know, no one likes rubbing down all day. We split the workload between us. Some jobs now I'm painting, some jobs now he's painting. But on a job like this, I just wanted to show the two differences of having the gun set up exactly the same for Clearcoat, but then being able to achieve two different finishes. So on one, we're going to get a much heavier, wetter finish that we can, and flatter finish that we can then fully mirror finish for a mirror finish repaint. And then on the other, we're going to be going for a factory. Now what I'm showing him here is, I noticed at one stage with the fan angled vertically, he was going in a straight line, and going sideways like I just showed there will obviously give a nice even flow. But if you go straight like that, that will build up a lot and instantly run. So just angling the gun a touch on those edges will obviously combat that. Rather than going straight down like I demonstrated there, going sideways, obviously you will get the better spread of the fan, and you will reduce the risk of excess build-up that you're putting on by accident. Now all the work that he's done on the back of the door there is spot on, because he's just taken that extra little bit of time. Excuse the camera, I have to take a thumbnail photo at some point, and I thought this was a prime time to do it. So like that there, he's got the gun sideways, so he's spreading the fan nice and even, whereas before he'd tried to go up that vertically and it would have added extra build-up. So if you look, because of his body position as he's coming towards the outside, the gun's angling at a very sort of almost like a 45-degree angle when it gets out to the side. So the further it goes out, the further it was angling off, and it was leaving that end a little bit drier. And as that's what I'm just demonstrating there, as he's getting towards that end, it's just curving out rather than keeping the gun straight on, and his wrist basically like his fist pointed straight at the panel. Now guns are designed to spray obviously perfectly straight from out of the gun. They're not designed to spray on that angle. So up at the top here, which is what I'm just showing him, it's nice and wet there where he was straight, but then down lower it's a little bit drier. Now on the first coat it's not an issue, and that is why we're in the booth today, so that we can pick up these little issues and help him tweak those out. Not to say that, you know, kind of like, well, you're doing this wrong, you know, you're a bad painter kind of way. This is a case of, right, these are the small flaws and the small bad habits, so let's tweak those out, give him that little bit more confidence. Also, I find with a lot of guys, a lot of you guys that have come to training days will know that I always say this: slow things down, concentrate on the technique. So here, nice and straight, nice overlap, nice consistent speed and distance all the way through. Much better. That panel absolutely spot on compared to where we started on the door just a few minutes ago, and there was a lot of turning the gun out at the sides. Instantly, second coat of Clearcoat, that's already started to pick up, and he's already started to work through in his head, right, I need to keep that a little bit straighter, I need to keep the speed nice. Keeping it straighter will keep the distance the same. So what I'm demonstrating here is, normally with a 50% overlap you'd be painting on the top of the dry edge of your first pass. Now what we're going to do here is reduce this down to a 70% overlap. So rather than hitting the edge of the dry edge, so I'd normally be hitting higher up there, I'm going to be hitting just, say, an inch lower than the dry edge. Now that's going to be giving me around a 70% overlap. So when I'm looking for that wetter finish, my gun settings are exactly the same as they were before. We're still running 2 bar, we're still running 1 3/4 turns on the fan. For the bonnet again, I'm running 3 turns on the fluid, and for the panels we'll be using 2.5 turns on the fluid. But by increasing that overlap, obviously I am putting more paint in less of an area. Now on a flat panel like this, it's not too much of an issue, because obviously it's a flat panel. It's not going to flow very far, it's going to flow and it's going to settle out nice and glassy, or nice and flat. Obviously on a horizontal panel, on a vertical panel, sorry, you need to be a little bit more careful of how much you load up. But you can go 70% quite easily with this gun at 2.5 turns. You just have to make sure that you are very accurate with that overlap, and that is my main key. So this is what I'm trying to demonstrate here. As I'm going across, that gun is pointed perfectly straight onto the panel. Even when I get out to the edges, I am keeping this gun pointed straight down. It gives the best transfer of the paint. It's the way that it's designed to spray, so that when we get onto something like this door in a second, we're going to make sure we do that in exactly the same way. At 2.5 turns, we can keep this 70% overlap and get it a lot wetter, and go for a sort of a wetter than factory finish, get a heavier build on there, so we've got that extra clear loaded up. Inside the doors will be nice and glassy, and then we can completely glass out the outside by giving it a mirror finish polish. Whereas the standard panel, which you painted last in the other coat, we're going to keep that to a 50% overlap. So the 50% overlap obviously won't put us quite as much clear down. It will leave it slightly peely because it won't be as wet, and then we'll get a better factory finish. So just by altering our overlap, we're going to end up with 2 completely different finishes, but with the exact same gun and the exact same setup and the exact same clear. So there's going to be no issues throughout any of this. One, basically going for a very flat, wet, heavier show car build, compared to a very factory everyday finish on the other one. And it's just, again, this is just to try and demonstrate that you can get 2 completely different finishes with the same gun, with the same setup, with just a small tweak. We're not adding any extra thinners, we're not changing the hardener, we're not laying these panels down. The only thing we're going to do is just change the amount of overlap on each coat. So when I come to the bottom of this panel, you'll see that, like this bottom section here on the first coat, it only took 2 passes. Now on this coat, we're putting in 3, almost 4 passes on that very small section. Now on the first coat, that only took 2 to get over that ridge. And again, the gun is kept perfectly straight all the way through, a really tight overlap. This is going to give us a real wet finish. It's going to leave a lot of clear on there, and again, as long as that overlap's accurate, this clear can handle it, this gun can handle it with these settings. You really can load this up a lot more than you think. You do need to give it plenty of flash off in between, but now we've got a nice wet glassy finish, and that's what we're looking for on these particular panels. So again, he's just finished up the insides of the backs of the panels. They look absolutely spot on. They're nice and wet, no signs of any runs or sags or drips anywhere, so they're absolutely spot on. And then, taken from sort of my method of teaching, of doing the edges first, is just catching those little edges around there, straight under to the bottom edge. So I think this is the part of the footage where I've corrected him on his body position, because with him being in the middle, if you notice there, he's turning the gun out because he's almost overstretching to the left, so the gun ends up angling off quite a lot, which again leaves that little bit of a less of a build there. So I'm just going to pause him and just sort of go through what I can see from where I'm stood, because that third person view gives me a lot better view of where things aren't quite going right. So now he's stood with his body further to the left, it's easier to get that extra stretch. Being right-handed, I find standing further towards the left of the panel helps a lot than standing towards the right of the panel, because once your gun comes past like center on your body, then you naturally try sort of, I don't know, it's kind of instinct that when you start overreaching, you just naturally start turning your wrist out to compensate, but by turning your wrist again, you're increasing the distance. And those are kind of like the main things that I always work on training days with technique for painting, is your speed, the distance, and also the overlap. Those three things make a massive difference to how a panel comes out, and also how consistent a panel comes out. What makes a good painter is not being fancy and flamboyant, it's just nailing those simple basics, if you want, but consistently getting them all the time. That's where painters end up getting less runs. You end up with a nice consistent finish top to bottom on a panel, because if you've kept the overlap and the speed and the distance the same on that panel from top to bottom, then say if the bottom of the panel's rough, the top should be rough. If the bottom of the panel's nice and glassy, the top should be glassy. It shouldn't be glassy at the bottom, glassy at the top and dry in the middle, or dry at the top and glassy everywhere else. You know, if you're keeping those the same, then it should stay consistent. Now, what I was just demonstrating there is, as he comes into a stroke, he tends to come in and dip his body down. So he starts higher, comes lower, and then resets and sort of starts lower. So again, this is just one little thing that I picked up, that rather than coming in and then going straight across, he tends to just bend his knees slightly as he goes to start the pass, which causes this dip in where the fan's going. And again, that just causes a tiny bit of inconsistency. But once I'd pointed these things out, the one thing that I will give him is he is a very fast learner. So once I'd pointed out these tiny little bits, then he was quite, well, I'd say quite quick. He's extremely quick at picking up these little things. So now, as you can see, each pass is going perfectly straight. The gun's now staying nice and straight. His body position's better on the panel, which is making life a lot more easy and a lot more comfortable. And as you'll see in a second, for me that was a perfect coat. It was nice and easy. As the day went on and we'd done these panels, he was getting more comfortable. And a few sessions in the booth obviously will help his confidence and help his ability, which is good for us, but also good for him as well. Because whether he stays with us for a few years, or, you know, a short time or a long time, you know, there's nothing wrong with putting a little bit of time into your lads. And as you can see, he's knocked out a really nice job. So that's it for my Clearcoat tips video for today. I hope you've enjoyed that little insight into a little bit of training that we've done at the shop. Sorry this week's video is a bit late, but I will see you again soon for the next one. Bye for now.